Let's make sense of this.
Let's make sense.
Sensemakers.
Hey, Keith.
Hey, Matthew. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I just got back from the Alteryx Inspire conference, and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Oh, yeah. Great. You know, it's been probably 3 years since I've been to the Inspire conference. It was a regular on my circuit, but I haven't been in the last couple of years, so I'm really curious.
It was a ton of fun, and can't wait to get into it and share some of the highlights.
Okay.
So just a little bit about me. I'm an analytics engineer here with Action. I'm Alteryx Expert certified. I'm one of 2 people, actually, that has every Alteryx certification. Beyond the certifications, I'm a business intelligence and IT consultant.
Super. Yeah, it's been great working with you. Love to have such a high caliber expert on our team. And also, I'm really looking forward to maybe increasing the amount of Alteryx content that we can produce here on the Sensemakers.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to give away too much, but I do have some ideas in mind of some, I think, curated Alteryx-specific content that I think would be value add.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So for the conference itself, I kind of bucket it into 3 big categories. One is the Grand Prix, which is kind of like my outfit right now. I'll get into more of that in a minute. I ended up being the pit crew, which I'll explain in a little bit later, and I got that because I had a very fast qualifying time in order to be part of the show. The second component is the sessions. So this is generally what people think of when going to a conference, you know, your breakout sessions, what were some kind of new features, some good speakers, and some content. And the stuff that I did was mainly wacky, but then also practical. So kind of getting a little bit of a non-standard experience.
Okay.
And then some final observations, and I'll just kind of give you the spoiler right now. AI.
It was all about AI.
That was definitely one of the themes, which I'll get to in a minute and kind of explain my 2 cents on.
Okay.
So the Grand Prix itself. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Alteryx Grand Prix is Alteryx's answer in a way to Tableau's Iron Viz. It's basically a speed competition where people get on stage and you race to win. Tableau's is a bit more subjective, where super users will build out these dashboards and then there will be voting and judges and a panel. The Grand Prix from Alteryx itself is strictly speed, so you get to the right answer first and you win. So it's a little more objective in that regard. So what they did this year was they opened it up to anybody that was at Inspire. So if you had a community name, if you were an ace, if you were a super user, if this was your first conference, if you've been using Alteryx for a week, everybody had the same opportunity to solve the same problem.
Oh, so it wasn't just 3 people on the stage like it had been in the past.
So what they had was, this year's was an all-star competition.
Okay.
So what they did was they took prior winners were racing, 4 of them, and then the 5th person overall would be the top leaderboard of like this open format. So of anybody that showed up to the conference and gave the problem a go, that top score got to be the 5th racer and the wild card, as it were.
Ah, got it. So it was like an open spot that anybody could get into.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And then places 2 through 6 were pit crew. And I'll explain a little bit more of what that is in a minute, but basically you're on stage to kind of help assist the driver that's competing, with some little helpers and some hints and things like that.
Yeah, that's like the Tableau Iron Viz Sue Vizer kind of thing.
Yep. Basically there to kind of help be either emotional support or tactical support, and be able to kind of help assist the driver when there's just so much going on. So I ended up having the 5th fastest time out of anybody that tried it, and I think that they had well over 100 people, including aces, some super users, and some people that tried it for the first time. So they really did have a good mix of people that gave it a go.
Yeah, and top percentile, you're our expert on the team. Yep.
Yep. So this is the third year that I've been able to qualify in one way or another. This year I was a pit crew, so I was support. But the prior 2 years I was actually on stage and raced against three of the people that were competing this year. So I had firsthand experience of kind of what they're like, as people, and then their skill set. And I'll just tell you, they're all very good, and it was truly an exciting race.
Yeah, top caliber skill sets up there.
Oh yeah, it's the best of the best, and when you make it an open format with prior winners and anybody, I mean, you're truly going to get, top tier talent. So once we found out the leaderboard of the top 6 people that had the top times for pit crew, then we did a random assignment of sorts for drivers, and I got assigned to Alex Abinajam, who works at Aimpoint. It was the first time I'd ever met him. Was at Inspire, but kind of one of those things in the small world where we had just known each other through the community, like through weekly challenges, through Advent of Code. It's just kind of one of those things where like, oh, I see your username, you see my username, and let's just, oh, that's right. Now I can put a name to the face, and I was assigned to him, and I was super pumped. And what they ended up having us do was backstage. Once we were assigned, we got, our t-shirts and some swag.
Yeah.
So Team Purple.
Looking good.
Yep, Team Purple. And what they ended up doing was giving us an overview of the problems. So when they were going to go on stage, they didn't give us the data or the workflow, but they kind of gave us a high-level summary of this is kind of what they're trying to do. Here's some common pitfalls they could have. And then here's kind of what you're looking for as a support person to make sure that they're on track. Because if they don't reach certain milestones at certain times and get behind, you just kind of want to make sure that you can get them back on track when that does happen.
That you can get them back on track. So this is one of the main differences with the Tableau IronViz, because the Tableau IronViz, everybody's seen the data ahead of time. They've built their dashboard, their workbook ahead of time. They've prepackaged their, everything they're going to do. And the speed is just about how fast can they click through to build it. Whereas here, like, you haven't even seen the data when you get up onto stage.
No, you get you'll get maybe about 10, 15 minutes before you'll get like an overview of the problem, but you won't see the data and you won't see anything about it. So you can kind of have a picture in your head of what it'll look like. And this can be good or bad. Sometimes the data matches kind of what you envisioned, but then there's other times where it's not at all what you thought it would be like in terms of a format, in terms of the structure. And so then you have to like retrain your brain to go, okay, this is what the data is. I get 2 minutes to look at it, and then and then you just go, and then you're just, it's an engine start, and you just take off and you just do your best, and it makes the best in the world kind of struggle, and it can be a very humbling experience for all involved.
Yeah, for sure. And I just got to say that the level of competition and caliber that you have to have in order to be competing on that stage is much more different, because it's very real time. Like, you're just seeing this thing for the first time, and everybody's on equal footing there. Whereas the Tableau folks have already spent a lot of time with the data, and they already know exactly what they're going to build.
Right. So in terms of like a yin and a yang, I mean, I think that they're both exciting, fun competitions, but I think the Alteryx one, I think is just a little bit more exciting because you just do have that like, oh man, like we don't know. We're all finding out together on stage and just like having to find something in real time, which is sometimes the real world. Like you get problems from clients or you get challenges at work and you don't get time to review. You're just kind of thrown into the fire and you're just kind of expected to solve something quick, whether it's a break fix or it's a big problem, and you're just on the spot as the expert coming into a meeting and go, solve it. And
solve this for us now, we're all watching.
Yep, exactly. And we expect you to be fast and get it right the first time, of course. Of course.
Yeah.
So what we ended up having to do was just ultimately time the racer to make sure they were doing what they were supposed to do, and then giving them some helper guides at different checkpoints. So the 2-minute mark, 5-minute mark, 7-minute mark, we would give them some helper clues, and then if they didn't get it by the 9-minute mark, they could take off their headphones, and I could coordinate with my driver, and the other pit crew could coordinate with their driver and go, okay, this is where you're stuck. do A, do B, do C, and you're done.
Got it. So it's like I'm in an escape room and I'm just stuck on something. The person who's on the intercom can give me a little clue so that I can keep moving forward.
Correct. Yep. And if you do get to that emergency moment of like, I'm truly stuck, you can take your headphones off and you can't communicate. So the escape room analogy is actually very accurate because that's kind of what it does feel like. You're against this clock, you're trying to get clues, and sometimes the clues are helpful, sometimes they're not, and you just have to navigate.
Yeah, make it happen.
Yep. So in terms of the format of it, so it's 3 rounds, and round 1 is about prepping your data. So in this particular instance, we had data from McLaren F1 because they're a big partner with Alteryx, and I think the last couple of Grand Prix have been McLaren data. And what you end up doing is you had to figure out some pit times and determine how long it took to get in and out of a pit time, and they wanted you to find the fastest pit stop. And of course, the data was not in a tabular format that was very easy and ready to use. You had to do some transformations and clean it up. And they also threw in some bogey data in there with some negative lap times to just make sure that you didn't just solve it right away and sort. So they always got to throw in like a little wrench in there just to make it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing is everybody gets to start at the exact same time. And then based on how you finish that question, that'll be your seeding for the second round. Okay. And so the second round is a spatial question, and it's generally the hardest one. And what they'll do is they'll stagger racers at 30-second intervals. So Claire, who finished first this time around, got to start the problem right away. The person who took second started at a 30-second delay. My driver, Alex, had a little bit of a struggle with the first problem, but once again, if you make any little mistake, you just get punished for it. But he was really, really close and ended up finishing last. But the benefit of finishing last in the first round is you get to start with a pit stop. So you get to start with a clue out the gate, and you get 2 extra minutes to think about the problem. And sometimes, especially with hard problems and code competitions, you can't underestimate the value of having more time to think about the problem statement and the solution. Because, Keith, I know one of your big expressions is slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Totally.
And so just getting that extra couple minutes to just think and strategize and plan and visualize can enable you to get to where you need to go faster. And a couple of years ago, that exact scenario came up for me. I was in last, had that extra time to visualize, and ended up taking first in the second round because of that extra buffer.
Totally. I'm all about it because I got a new saying, think 4 times, measure twice, cut once, right? Like it's all about like thinking ahead, knowing what you're going to do, having your high level trajectory through a problem, then get into measurement and precision with solving the problem, and then cut once. Yep.
And that's exactly it. So we had a good game plan on paper.
Okay.
And that was it. We're going to get some extra time with the problem, be good to go. Unfortunately, Claire, Molly, and Ben absolutely just crushed the question and got done so fast. Alex was halfway through before he even had an attempt to try and get to an answer. So they thought when we were backstage, Alteryx support thought it was going to take 9 minutes. They thought it was going to be a longer problem and that everybody would have a fair chance. People were done in 4 and 5 minutes. It was one of those times where you got a bunch of smart people in a room. They figured out the problem fast, and that 2-minute disadvantage just ultimately just hurt. It was good to visualize and have that game plan, but in this particular case, the others used the time advantage to their benefit and were able to advance. So unfortunately, Alex was not able to make the top 3, which sets up the final round. Okay. So Molly Harris, last year's winner, Claire McCullough, winner of 2 years ago, and then Ben Moss, who had won in Europe a few years before that, were in the final 3. So Alex and myself, and then there was another driver, JB from France, who's just a brilliant individual, and we were able to watch it backstage. So they had a TV backstage in a green room with some food and some drink, and so we were able to watch the final lap, which was a predictive problem. Okay. And kind of similar to the first round, everybody starts at the same time. But in this one, whoever gets it first wins. And that's the setup.
Got it. Cut to the chase.
Yep. And it was a very tight race. Molly got out to a big lead early. Claire was closing the gap very fast. Molly had a syntax error, and Claire and Ben were closing on her very close. And then at the very end, Molly fixed her syntax error, connected it up, was successful, and then won the All-Stars competition and is a back-to-back winner and the second ever to win twice.
This has just got to be exhilarating because, I mean, you have all of these just world-class experts. Each of them has won in the past. They're literally like pushing the edge of who's best in the world, and it's all just coming down to the final minute.
Yep, it really was, and they just put it the video up. Alteryx put the video up to rewatch it, so we were able to rewatch it and see it from different angles, and it really did come down to the final handful of seconds. Like if somebody didn't, if Molly struggled, Claire could have easily won or Ben could have easily won, but hey, that's the race. She found her error and just is so fast and so talented, and was very happy for her. So the picture I've got here on the left, Molly in the center holding the trophy, back-to-back winner. I'm just to her right, kind of wearing the outfit I've got now.
Looking good.
Yep. And then just to the right of me is Ben in the green shirt. He was the other competitor. Just to the left of Molly in the light blue is Claire McCullough, who was the one of the other finalists. And then JB is hiding a little bit behind Ben and me in yellow. His face is a little blacked out at the moment. Just unfortunate timing for him on the
photo,
on the picture. But yeah, and then the crew on the left was people involved in the production. So Megan Bowers, who's chief content podcast person for Alteryx, and then Dan, who was one of the organizers of the event, and then just next to him was Jared, who had won twice, and just a ton of key Alteryx people from past and present, and just a really exciting moment to share the stage. The next photo I've got in the top right was the qualifying times. So earlier I had mentioned I had taken 5th. And so you can see some of the times. Alex, who was number 1, finished in 6 minutes and 18 seconds on a spatial question. And I came in about 45 seconds later at a little over 7 minutes. And then that was us in the bottom right as kind of our little team. And the reason for the question mark is because they had photos of all the drivers as like signs to hold up.
Okay.
But because it was a last, second format, they didn't have time to turn around and get a photo of Alex. So we just had the question mark and just thought it was funny and just ran with it as, team question mark, the mystery wild card.
Love it.
So yeah, that was definitely my highlight. I think it, every year in terms of some capacity or another, if you're able to participate or qualify or just be involved, it truly is the excitement and the chat that comes with the Alteryx conference. So the next area is sessions. Sessions is definitely an experience that, depending on your career trajectory and your goals, you're going to have very different experiences. So for me, I've been going to Alteryx conference for about 7 years now. And so what I go for now is to try and either watch great speakers or to try to watch unique content that isn't necessarily something I'll see every day, and have a chance to hear from somebody that is either brilliant or a group of people that think about problems a different way.
Yep.
So the first one, and probably my favorite, and I think among the presenters, this is become the annual favorite topic, and it's called Obscura.
Okay.
What Obscura is its use cases for Alteryx that are generally not meant to be helpful or useful. The idea is that, can you take this tool, do something outside of the box with it, and present it as an idea? And you can just see the creativity, some genius, and some, whether it's inefficient or not practical solutions that just really can make you take a step back. And I would say it's kind of like watching just a good movie. You don't necessarily have to solve the puzzle. You don't have to think about how I would do it. You can just sit back, have some popcorn, and just be entertained by some of the craziest, wackiest stuff you'll see. That's part of the conference. So an example of that was JB, one of the individuals in the Grand Prix, had a his premise was overcomplication. So the idea is that you can drag tools onto the Alteryx canvas in 3 kind of conventional ways. And he's like, well, let me show you a 4th. And so I was initially curious, and then he puts on this incredibly overcomplicated app that allowed you to pick a tool, and then it would just generate a tool on a workflow. Overcomplicated, completely unnecessary, something you would never do, but just the creativity that comes to mind with something like that. Just thought it was funny, thought it was entertaining.
Totally. And that's super useful too, because when you take a thing and you run it orthogonally to where it doesn't normally run that way, that's what helps you to explore the limits and explore the boundaries and identify the art of the possible. And then later that art of the possible can come back and kind of be the clinch pin for a real problem.
Yep. It reminded me of when I went to the Tableau conference years ago, and I think one of the Zens at the time built a Super Mario interface in Tableau.
Totally.
This is kind of like Alteryx's version of that, with people coming up with not necessarily helpful, but just at least creative ways to think about problems or creative approaches that just entertaining. It's just entertaining. And easily the talk of the conference in terms of sessions. Okay. They had it twice with 2 different completely sets of speakers, and it completely booked both times.
Right, the art of the possible.
The next one, I would say this one was definitely much more on the practical side. Claire McCullough, who was one of the other racers in the Grand Prix, she put together one of the best presentations I've ever seen about Alteryx and problem solving, and it was about generalizability, scalability, and maintainability. And she said that these 3 guiding principles are generally going to be what you're going to want to think about when you're building a workflow in advance. And she gave these amazing use cases of what falls into something that you're going to want to make generalizable, like if your data is in a different column every time, and making sure that you get the data the way you want. Scalability, where like if your record count exploded by 100, how would you handle that? How would your workflow handle it? And then maintainability. If you want to add a new data source, if something comes up that's different, how easy is it going to be to pass this off from person A to person B? And then ultimately to bring it home, she gave a couple examples of how these 3 sometimes can be in conflict with each other, and then how to weigh them out to determine what's more important when there's some competing priorities. And it was just an excellent blueprint for, I would say, any developer from beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert, to have just as a good blueprint to think about problems. Very thorough. Could not recommend it enough. And I think anybody that was there got a treat. And fortunately, she's put it out in the Alteryx universe as a blog post. So those that were not able to attend can at least pick up some of the concepts. And I would also say that in terms of a content creator, she's a must-read.
Okay, super. So we can link to that in the show notes below. Definitely recommend that people subscribe to that. These kinds of mental models, I'm a big fan of mental models, which is basically like framing out how to think about a problem. It's super important as the complexity of the problems that we're facing is ever increasing.
Absolutely. And then the final one I wanted to call out, Toyo, COE. So Toyo is a Japanese firm, and what they did is they put together their best practices for, I would say, the administrative side. So they have a lot of users, they have a lot of workflows, they have a big Alteryx gallery with a lot of jobs. And what they ended up having their presentation be around is like, well, how can we assign licenses as new people come on, or people leave the company and we want to reassign those and not have it be a manual process.
Right.
How do we want to handle multiple jobs running at the same time? How do we balance out our workflow schedule? And then the final aspect was training. How can they upskill their users to be better? So what they used as metrics was the certification exams. So starting with the core and then ultimately to advanced. And one thing that they did, which I thought was brilliant, was they did an analysis of all the workflows built by all users. And they did some analysis on what tools were used most frequently, and determined based on which tools were used most frequently, they targeted their training content towards that.
Oh, right. Yeah. Go to where the people are.
go to where the people are, go to what they're building, and then they can start identifying people in terms of like what track should they be on. Should they be on a core track? Should they be on an advanced track? And I thought it was very sophisticated, and some of the problems and use cases they had were exceptionally challenging, but then also balancing that with improving your team, scaling your server, and then your environment in a way I thought was super valuable for anybody that had the opportunity to go to it.
Okay, great.
And then I've got some observations. So covered some Grand Prix stuff, covered some sessions. So as I said at the top, AI, AI, AI.
Right.
The keynotes were about AI. The new product releases were AI, which is their new Aiden Copilot, which is their Gen AI way of assisting with workflow building.
Mm-hmm.
They have other features for auto insights to be able to kind of connect your data into some machine learning models that can help generate reports that can kind of do some of the legwork there. And then also do some documentation leveraging AI. So a lot of the new features, a lot of the new items in 2024.1, and a lot of the speaker keynotes were all about AI. And I felt like
AI.
we were at a conference where their vision for the product and their vision for the platform going forward is going to be very AI focused. And it's about how do you integrate AI into a traditional data engineer or a data analyst or a line of business user that needs to do data prep.
Right, because you've got these data pipelines engineers that are using Alteryx to do the meat and potatoes of data work and data preparation. How do we, it sounds like, bring AI to them to enable them in their process and workflow?
Yep, and just kind of assist maybe with some administrative tasks. Documentation's always a kind of a thorn in the side of any programmer or developer, and being able to kind of help assist on some of that. Being able to kind of build out some ready-to-go reports can certainly be easier, especially when sometimes as an engineer you're asked not just to build a workflow, but then you're also asked to build maybe a version 1 or a version 2 of a subsequent report, and that can just take a ton of time. So just kind of having a product that can assist with that will just speed up your time, and then because it's Alteryx, they've got it wired in to be able to email and do stuff programmatically, so it's kind of meant to be a bit more of a helper hand.
Okay, so what about actually like, BYOLLM and say going out to Hugging Face and pulling down the latest Llama 3 model and doing the AI of the AI in Alteryx? Was there any of that?
There might have been some stuff. I know that there's been some content around leveraging Gen AI in your workflows, and I know that there's some content out there for that. I didn't personally get into any of those breakout sessions, but it wasn't covered specifically in the keynotes and in some of the Alteryx overall. They were just more kind of high level 1 thinking for getting your AI involved. But there were a couple devs that did some AI breakouts that I know went 2 or 3 layers deep on how to integrate.
On how to call the AI API endpoint that you want and integrate those calls into your workflow and do all that stuff. That's actually Matthew, pretty sort of rewarding to me, because what it on its face sounds like is that they weren't necessarily sort of jumping on the bandwagon and saying, everybody in the industry is doing this thing, so we're going to make our keynote all about this thing. But rather, it sounds like they were positioning AI more in the nooks and in the crannies and in the places like producing documentation and building reports and generating workflows and helping maybe to solve that syntax problem that she had in the race. Those types of everyday friction problems. How can we bring AI to the person that's in the seat doing the work, as opposed to sort of chasing the kind of industry fad, which is what a lot of the keynotes out there are doing.
Yeah, and I think, certainly the Alteryx audience there, certainly, educated engineers and analysts and things like that. So I think that they're going to be able to kind of discern some of the things that come up in keynotes. So they're going to be able to determine, is this buzzword soup, or is this actually like something useful that I can actually work with? And I think the products that they're trying to offer are definitely in the helper hand, assist with admin tasks, be able to kind of do some legwork and get maybe a couple steps ahead on your BI process. And at the end of the day, you still need, a human mind to set up the problem statement, think about the problem statement, design the problem, and like anything else, AI is a good tool to assist with, building out what you need to build out. You got to still come up with the roadmap, you still got to come up with the plan, and then be able to kind of take another tool. You've got a hammer, you got a screwdriver. Hey, we got some new fancy tools that can kind of help us solve these problems. And I think that that's what Alteryx is trying to do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One question I had was a sense at the conference for how Alteryx going private is actually playing out. Was there any kind of palpable, notable sensation or theme that you picked up on that topic?
I think it was very difficult to tell, honestly. I think if you went to the conference and didn't know that they were bought or turned private, you would have no idea. The key speakers they had with Paula Hansen and Suresh, they came out, they spoke prior years, they came out and they spoke again this year. They were featured in keynotes. There wasn't anything referencing the buyout. There wasn't anything referencing going private. You would not have known that from any vibe or from any presentation based on how things went. If you just went to this in cold and didn't pay attention to the news on that, you would just think that this was, another conference, another year, and just this is a product that, has new releases and some cool new things, and, that did not come up at all. And whether that was by design or not by design, it was it's certainly not in your face. And if you thought about that, you had to go pretty far under the hood to find content or find anything that touched on that.
Got it. Okay. Well, that in itself is a tell, and it must have been by design. And again, I'm rewarded by that as well. Is there anything else about the conference that you want to highlight for the audience?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that they did this year, which was they had fewer breakout sessions, so you weren't able to necessarily get as much content as you wanted in prior years. You weren't able to do maybe as much as you could have wanted, or maybe have it as full of a dance card. But there was so much help around in terms of the community, in terms of Alteryx support, in terms of certification experts, in terms of ACEs. There were so many people around that I couldn't tell you how many customers or random people in the Alteryx world that just were like, hey, I got a question about this. I was like, you know what? Talk to Josh over there. He is great at this type of thing. Or Megan over there is great for podcasts and content. You could have hung out in Mavericks Nation, which was kind of their central hub for kind of hangouts and partners, and where they had the Grand Prix trial. You could have just had so many questions answered, had so many good conversations, and not feel like you have to go through 10 layers of security to talk to somebody you want to talk to.
To get to somebody.
Yeah, it's a few thousand people there, and there's so many super users, aces, sharp people in the Alteryx world that you're one or two people away from having a relevant conversation or just asking a follow-up question on a topic that you saw. And I think that that's the real value add of the conference. You can really just get that interpersonal connection with people that might be a little tougher at a bigger conference, or maybe some speakers that do their sessions and then kind of don't necessarily engage, with students or with other attendees, and they kind of just do their own thing. There was so much stuff, and I couldn't tell you how many people walked away satisfied, being like, wow, I didn't realize I could talk to this person about some server issue I had or some scaling issue in just like a quick 5-10 minute chat with somebody that was just hanging out. And I think that that's what's always special about the Alteryx conference, is you've got so many people that are passionate about this product, and there's so many people that know who all the key people are for all these different areas. If you just ask the right question to anybody in a room, you can get directed so fast and really get that value out of the conference that you might have not gotten in a breakout session or might not have gotten in a keynote. You
can get to the person who has the answer. And actually that's way better than relying on the sessions themselves to answer your question, because a lot of these problems, I mean, if it's got you confounded, it's going to be a bugger. And so to rely on a session having been dedicated on exactly how to solve that thing is fairly impractical. So that sounds great. Well, thanks, Matthew, for coming on and giving this recap. Really glad to have you here now as a part of the Sensemakers. Love having you as a part of the Action team. And let's see over the next say month or two what it can look like to bring some more Alteryx conference here to the Sensemakers podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Keith. This was a blast, and have a good one.
Okay, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Let's make sense of this.
Let's make sense.